How do you turn 23 hours of project management theory into a passing score on the CAPM exam without feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of terms, life cycles, and processes? This is the central question every candidate faces as they move from the orientation phase into the core technical sections of the course. Success on the CAPM is not a result of cramming the weekend before the test. It is the result of a deliberate strategy that prioritizes understanding the underlying logic of the Project Management Institute over simple rote memorization. Today, we are going to lay out your personal roadmap for success, identifying the high-yield study habits you should adopt and the common traps you must avoid to ensure you walk into the testing center with total confidence. The most effective study strategy for the CAPM is built on the principle of consistency over intensity. Rather than attempting 10-hour study marathons, you should aim for 90 minutes of focused engagement each day. As you progress through the sections, use active recall by summarizing each lecture in your own words before moving to the next. For example, after finishing a lecture on the work breakdown structure, stop and explain to yourself, out loud if possible, how a WBS differs from a simple to-do list. This forces your brain to retrieve information rather than just recognizing it on a screen, which is exactly what you will have to do during the 150 questions of the actual exam. One of the most common mistakes candidates make is falling into the memorization trap. Many students believe that if they can just memorize the definitions of every term in the PMBOK guide, they will pass. However, the modern CAPM exam tests your ability to recognize which tool or process is appropriate for a specific scenario. You need to understand the flow of project information. Instead of just memorizing what a risk register is, you must understand how a risk is identified, how it is analyzed, and how that analysis leads to a specific response. PMI wants to see that you understand the relationship between documents and decisions, not just that you have a good vocabulary. Another frequent hurdle is the workplace habit trap. This is where a learner answers exam questions based on how their current company manages projects, rather than how PMI defines the standard. In the real world, your boss might combine the roles of sponsor and project manager, or your team might skip formal change control because we're a small company. On the exam, you must set those habits aside. You must answer every question from the perspective of a perfect project environment, where the standards are followed correctly. If a question asks what the next step is when a scope change is requested, the answer is always to follow the formal change control process, even if your real-world office would just fix it on the fly. A major area where students often lose points is by neglecting the business analysis and Agile domains. Because many people associate project management primarily with traditional waterfall scheduling, they spend 80% of their time on predictive methods. However, the current CAPM exam allocates a massive 27% of its questions to business analysis and 24% to Agile and adaptive frameworks. This means nearly half of your exam has nothing to do with traditional Gantt charts. To succeed, you must give equal weight to learning how to manage a product backlog and how to facilitate requirement solicitation. Treat the business analysis section with the same level of discipline you give to the technical scheduling lectures. When it comes to the mechanics of the exam itself, time management is your greatest ally. You have 180 minutes for 150 questions, which gives you roughly 72 seconds per question. We recommend the 3-pass technique. On your first pass, answer only the questions you are 100% sure about. If a question looks complex or requires a long calculation, flag it and move on immediately. This ensures you bank all the easy points early and reduces the anxiety of seeing the clock run down. On your second pass, tackle the flagged questions that require more thought. On your final pass, review your answers, but be very careful about changing them. Your first instinct is often the correct one, unless you missed a keyword like not or except. Slide 7. Decoding lifecycle keywords. Finally, pay close attention to the keywords in every question stem. PMI uses specific language to signal which lifecycle you are in. If you see words like iteration, sprint, backlog, or servant leader, the question is asking you to apply Agile logic. If you see words like baseline, phase gate, critical path, or variance, you are in the predictive world. Choosing the right hat to wear, the Agile hat or the predictive hat, is often the difference between finding the correct answer and falling for a distractor. By training your brain to spot these signals, you turn a confusing paragraph into a clear decision point.